everyone. I'm Linda Nickell, and welcome to the Happiness Hour. Every week, photographers meet here to connect, inspire, and create. The schedule for upcoming presentations is on my website at lindanickell.com. My guests share their tips, techniques, and the stories behind their photographs. So if you need a little inspiration, join us here every Wednesday night. Tonight's guest is Curtis Hoover. Curtis is a Texas-based photographer that wanders along his local back roads and spends a lot of his time photographing iconic Texas subjects like wildflowers, windmills, rural landscapes, the rusted farm equipment, and the abandoned barns scattered along old dirt roads. Curtis has been a Happiness Hour attendee for several years, and on a very cold morning this past January, I met him at a local photography event that the Happiness Hour team participated in, and I took the opportunity to invite Curtis to share his photography with us, and I am so pleased that he said yes. You can connect with him at curtishooverphotography.com, and if you're on Instagram, you can find him at Curtis D. Hoover. In tonight's presentation, Life Along the River in Photographs, Curtis will share his photos and stories of the people, nature, wildlife, and the scenic beauty of his favorite Texas river. Welcome to Happiness Hour, Curtis.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you for having me. I've enjoyed a lot of these throughout the last few years, and so I'm kind of excited to share some of what I know and the area that I'm staying in right now.
Well,
Um,
like I said, you've been coming for a while now, and then to meet you in person, it's really odd, but it's really fun to see people outside the square. You've got a whole body and stuff. So it was really nice to meet you. And I always say this to everybody that I persuade to come into a presentation for us. Thank you, because I know that it's like, what am I going to talk about? Oh my gosh, I've never done this before. And it always surprises me when people say yes, and you didn't hesitate, and I so appreciate that. So I know the river you're talking about. I'm familiar with the area that you drive around and live by. So it'll be fun for me to see it from your perspective. So with
well,
that,
absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely.
Um, do you want to, I don't know if when I do my introductions, I kind of grab and pick things that I want to say about a person. And sometimes I miss something, like, maybe there's something that you want to share. And if I miss something, take the opportunity to
Sure.
yeah.
Okay. Well, I live here in New Braunfels, Texas, and I've been in New Braunfels about 17 years now, and in Texas 22. I've lived all over the west side of the nation. I grew up in eastern Washington, North Idaho area, and the rivers there are a lot larger. Tonight we're going to talk about our local Guadalupe, but the Columbia is a lot wider, so is the Snake River and several of those. Um, but tonight though we'll be talking about the Guadalupe, but some of my photography background is like a lot of people. I started off, my parents got me a pocket camera when I was a kid. I think they were the Kodak 110 or something along that lines. In high school, I took some graphic arts classes, enjoyed those. Got to play in the dark room and experiment. And then as I got older, I ended up getting myself a 35 millimeter film camera. And this is back in the day when you had to mail off your film. And so it's very exciting when we had 1 hour photomats, without trying to date myself very much.
You're dating me.
We'd go out and
Whoa.
go out with photograph my children or a hike or something along that lines, and be fortunate enough to get my photos back within an hour. But I didn't do a lot with that. And then the last, about 4 years ago or so, I decided, you know what, I'd like to get back into photography. So I started off with a kit camera, kit lens. Upgraded my lenses, upgraded my body. Now I'm shooting a Nikon D750, um, full frame, which I really enjoy. Um, Decided I needed to upgrade my education. So when I saw Linda had the happiness hour and there's YouTube and everything else that you can learn from, there's just no reason not to continue your education. Um, but let's jump into it. Like I say, I live in New Braunfels, and New Braunfels is known for two or three things: Schlitterbahn Water Park, Wurstfest, and the Comal and Guadalupe River. So the Guadalupe, some of this I kind of looked up some information about it because when I start photographing a subject, I get really into it. I want to know as much as I can about the subject. And the Guadalupe River is about 250 miles long, starts above where I live up in Kerrville, and I believe it's San Antonio Bay that it runs all the way down to. Um, and all the way through central Texas. Um, but one of the things I like to do, those I really like moody kind of photographs. The last couple of years, the river has been very, very low. This first photograph here, let me see why it won't advance. There we go. This first photograph here um, is between Canyon Lake and New Braunfels, and they had been letting out water. I think this was right around Memorial Day, perhaps. And they like to, with all the tubers, tubing is a big, big sport in Texas. Um, they like to make sure that the guides can make some money during that time, I guess. So the river does look a little bit fuller in this photograph. Um, but like I say, some of the stuff I like to do is shoot through, like here I'm shooting through the trees. Um, I really like to try to get the foliage in there. Of course, the reflection on the water. Um, I'll just kind of advance these and share with you. Here again, I'm shooting through two trees. This is actually right alongside the roadway, um, going from New Braunfels to Starksville. This spot here is really well known for fly fishing throughout the years, especially now that hopefully we're getting into the cooler weather in November, that the state is really good about stocking trout, and you'll see two or three fly fishermen giving each other space in this area. This particular day, there really wasn't any. Um, and, but some of the fun stuff about photographing the Guadalupe is you have tall trees. They try to leave trees along the shoreline to help control um, erosion. And then typically on the other side, you'll find cliffs where you can see that there has been erosion, the different lines, stratas of the soil. Um, and this one here happens to have some caves and stuff back in there. So I like to try to use the lines on the strata as much as I can to kind of lead you around the bend as the water comes around. Uh, During the fall, you'll notice on a lot of the photographs, the water is real green. I try not to really fight with the colors very much. If the water is green from the color cast from the leaves, I try to work with that. Here during the fall, the leaves are gone, and so the water reflects the sky into this vibrant blue. Um, this is definitely during a fly fishing season. Um, you can see where folks live alongside the river on one side. The other side, if I remember right, is lower ground for flood control. But there's boats out there with fly fishermen and guiding them. And I try to use the river as much as I can for my leading lines. Um, in the fall, which we haven't started seeing much fall colors yet, it's just too warm just yet. We can The leaves will change here in Texas. A lot of times people think there aren't seasons. Some of them are very short. Uh, Summertime seems to be the longest since I've been here. Um, but This photograph, the thing that caught my eye the most with it when I got home, and even while I was making it, is the lines on the roots of the cypress trees that you can see where the water levels had been. At this moment, it's lower than some of the other previous water levels, and it'll leave if the water stays that height for a period of time, it'll leave lines along there. It'll leave its marks. Um, let's see. One thing I like to do at times too is always when I go out, my day job, I'm a project manager, so I'm a list maker. I like to have a plan when I go in. But when I go out to photograph, I usually have something in mind that I want to work on, whether it's for my photography or a particular set of skills that I want, or a particular photograph that I'm looking for. So like here, I'm using a tripod so I can use a longer exposure, give me some softer water. Um, the only thing I'll caution you on is, well, I really like the green foliage in the back. When the wind blows, the foliage will blur. The leaves will blur. Um, but here again, this is a bunch of rock with the cypress tree and a tree growing out of the center of its trunk. Probably held some soil and that tree just grew up. Um, Another thing I like to do is I like to, again, I'll use my tripod, but I will use as small an aperture as I can. I like the starbursts. I know people go through different phases and fads, but to me, it's just something I really like. So I like to pick something in the foreground, like this log there that kind of add interest there in the front. Um, get reflections anywhere the water is a little bit darker and still. And then, of course, the starburst from the sun there. Another thing I like to do is I like to change my perspective. And in this case, I got about as low as I could on this day and focused in on these rocks here in the lower right-hand corner there. But I still had the river behind it, and of course the cliff walls there on the opposite side of the water. Um, Try to blur everything else except for what I really want people to focus on. Um, and this was kind of just a shady day. There wasn't any real extreme highlights other than reflections coming off the water. And it was just where the greens and yellows just really popped with it. One thing I do, like I say, I like to get close and get close to my subject. Um, I will, if even driving down the road, I will stop, kick off my shoes and socks, roll up my pant legs, and go out in the middle of the water to get a different perspective. I've learned to keep flip-flops in almost all the vehicles. Um, I'm not as good at walking on rocks as I used to be when I was younger. On this particular one, I was setting up to do a little bit larger scene, um, a little bit larger landscape down the river, and I happened to see this leaf sticking out of the water. Um, you can see where some of it is soaked up the water and the rest of it is dry. I'm not one that really likes to stage a photograph. Um, so I think I took the camera off the tripod at this point and tried to get as low as I could, using a small aperture so I could get those uh, light bokeh balls there towards the back. Um, and then here again, I was at this point I believe I was photographing this little waterfall that's behind these rocks. with my tripod, but I happened to see these rocks, and for whatever reason, they caught my eye. Um, so I took the camera off. One of my hacks, and I don't know where I picked this up at, is I always like to keep a dry pair of socks in my camera bag. It's kind of my one luxury type item. And I have found with those, I can take a pair or take a sock, basically turn it into a bean bag and use that to help stabilize my camera. I believe when I got this photograph, I was laying in the mud, basically right next to the water, to get this angle, to get as low as I did. Um, and same thing here. This is a little stream that feeds into the Guadalupe. Um, this one is actually up towards Blanco, um, above Canyon Lake. And I was out hiking around the Guadalupe River on the north end of the lake, and this is one of the little streams that fed into it. And the reflections just really caught my eye. Um, I wanted to get everything as sharp as I could right there with those two stones and really make a dividing line between the reflection in the water and the rest of the scene. Uh, this would have been the rapids that I was actually in the water with my tripod trying to get this photograph when I saw those stones. Um, I just wanted to, my goal here was I wanted to get somewhere on the river where I knew I could get some steps of, we don't really have large waterfalls. I wouldn't even consider this a waterfall, but more of a little rapid. But I wanted to get the water stepping down in several steps if I could. And so I found this spot here, waited out in there and set up my tripod. Um, I think this was with a 24 to 70. I use a lot of zoom lenses. Primarily my the two I carry the most probably would be my 24 to 70 and my 70 to 200. Um, that I really like prime lenses, but it's a lot to carry, and I can adjust the zoom lenses relatively quickly and still get good sharp focus in spots. Um, Here again, this is just kind of one of those smaller type tight shots. This was in the fall with golden leaves in the water. I don't do a lot of post post developing. I may have bumped the blues up just a little bit, blues and aqua colors up just a little bit, just to help add to push your eye more towards the gold, kind of make it two colors. Um, but but every time I'm walking along the river, I'm always looking for anything that floats always catches my eye. Anything that's just kind of not where it's supposed to be. This should have been on a tree. Um, and for those of you, like I said, I grew up in the Pacific Northwest. So for those of you not aware that Texas can get snow and ice. It's usually only about a week long, maybe if we're lucky, and not every year. Um, I like to go back to the same location just because of its ease, and it's easy for me to get there. And so I like to get different photographs from that location throughout the year. This one here, uh, I don't think I really got in the water on this one. It was just too cold this day, but I was trying to get the little ice along the shoreline there to lead your eye out into the river. Uh, and we do get snow, like I say. This is that same bluff from an earlier photograph. Um, this is on the third bridge or third crossing, as they call it, of the river. There's four crossings between New Braunfels and Canyon Lake or Starksville. And we were getting some snow. We were just starting to get snow. Like I say, I like to stick to an area, and the next couple of photographs are the same area, just a little different um, shot. Here, the water stays pretty much a constant temperature in the 70s, low to mid 70s. In the summertime, it's great. In the wintertime, it still feels very cold. But here, the air was colder, so you get all that great mist coming up. Um, and then this is the same location about 2 or 3 weeks later, I think it was that I took this photograph. Um, this time I stayed up a little higher up towards the road, but I wanted to get all this. I wanted to get the snow at the base of the trees. Of course, definitely have the river in there um, as a identifier. Um, a lot of people who see my stuff know that I photographed quite a bit along the river, and then the next thing I was going to share with you is reflections. This is probably one of the first ones I ever made. Uh, I enjoy a great reflection. I didn't stack these rocks. I was actually floating on a paddleboard when I saw these, so I was able to stay low and get this shot. I have both a kayak and a paddleboard, but I do prefer the paddleboard a lot because our river, the Guadalupe and the Comal, are not that deep in most places, to where with the paddleboard, I can slide off of the board, stand in the water, and use the board to stabilize my camera, give me a tabletop basically to stabilize my camera. Um, Here again, the cypress to me, they just the roots on the cypress make such a great subject because the lines go down pretty much uncontrollably. They just have a great shape to them. With reflections, the one thing I found is the smoother the water, and the darker the water, the better the reflection. Because all the reflection really is just the light coming back at it at the same angle that it was hitting the subject. This one here, I know I was on my paddleboard for this one because I was right on top. I was just about, I think my camera would probably be 3 inches above the water. Um, and the thing that really caught me there again was just the shape of the roots because it almost looks like it's mirrored in two different directions. Um, if the water has any ripples to it, I put this one in there. I'm not a great bird photographer. I have a lot of respect for bird photographers. They move too quick for me typically. I do have a lot of photographs of birds, but they have a tendency to move too quick for me. But I really like the reflection on this just because of the ripples in the water. Kind of gave it a very interesting design pattern. Um, this is, I believe, a snowy egret. I'm not 100% sure on all of my birds, but he stood still long enough for me to get this photograph. And then anything man-made, I going in around the river to me just adds a little bit of interest. These stairs, it's almost like a geometric shape. They come down and go back into the water at the same angle that they came down, giving a real sharp point at the entry of the water. Um, and then, of course, all the root system around it. I like that. And then color to me, I really one of the things about the Guadalupe, there's a lot of people that enjoy kayaking as well as the tubing. There's kayakers and paddleboarders like myself. Um, to me, it adds a real nice pop of color, and with the reflection there again, it just kind of everything's kind of mirrored and doubled, which just makes it jump out. This was a real early morning. I was in my kayak for this one. This is down towards Seguin, and nobody was up yet. The water was perfectly still, just like glass. And this is a resorter that had them all set up ready. I guess they were getting ready probably for the day, or had them tethered up for the night. And like I say, nobody was around. Just I thought it made just a really great, interesting photograph. Um, since we're going to talk about the river, I wanted to show that we do get the rivers can be very dangerous. This particular fence, as of 2 weeks ago, would be the river itself would be approximately 8 feet lower than what the top of that fence is right now. Um, but this, I believe, was in 2017, 2018, right in there. Um, and we got some rain, and it rained very well. This next photograph, I was up on a deck looking down. The fence would actually be inside or just behind the tree on the left-hand side, and the water was over the top of the fence. You can see part of a lower fence a little further down at the smaller trees. So the water was quite high at this time. At this point, typically for recreation, I think they like the water to be running about 500 cubic feet per minute. Anything over 750, they say you should definitely be able to swim and use a and use flotation devices. Um, to me, this is too strong for me to have any ambition to go out there and get in, because it can be very dangerous. Uh, the next day I came up, the water, even at that height, was never high enough to block the roads. So the next day I came up and the water had stopped raining, the water had receded, and you can see this photograph I threw it in just to kind of help show how powerful that water is. Uh, it broke that kayak or canoe right in half when it hit that tree. I don't know whose canoe it was or where it came from, but it just kind of showed the power of the water, and you can see how high the water had been. And this is at a campground right alongside the road there. One thing I was going to talk about is I like to add people to my scenes. Um, I'm not a portrait photographer. I don't aspire to be. I've taken photographs of people, but I would rather stick with the nature. But I do like to add. I think people can add interest to our scenes. They can help us tell a story. Um, they can add scale to the scene. Um, you have to be a little bit careful depending on what story you want to tell, because you don't want the people to become the subject. Um, or I don't care for the people to become the subject as much as I want them to just add something to the scene itself. Um, this is my girlfriend. We were kayaking, trying to remember which stretch of river this is. I want to say this is between the fourth crossing and third crossing off of River Road, just north of New Braunfels. And she had stopped for a bottle of water, and I had wanted to stop anyway to take photographs, but I included this one with her. Um, I just felt like it gave more scale to the width of the river at this portion and how much further we needed to go. Um, this scene here, this was actually right at the end of COVID, and we were still semi practicing social distancing, if you will, per the rules. And I was out here, and this scene really didn't do much for me, but I included this photograph because I wanted to show this one. While I was taking it, these guys were paddling down the road or down the river. And like I say, the paddles and the add a splash of color. The gentleman in the red shirt behind him adds a splash of color. They're not my focus point, but you know that they're people. I think sometimes it helps at a certain quality to where I can almost see myself in there, where if I saw their face, I might not feel like I could put myself in the scene. Um, Same thing here. Again, this is my girlfriend. We were setting up to go float. I've got some with her looking at the camera, but this one I just really liked. I thought shared well for everybody because there's no face with it. I think almost anybody could feel like they could step in there and enjoy the river. Um, One of my favorite times to photograph, of course, is early morning when you get those nice light. Um, we were actually camped on this particular weekend, and these were my camp neighbors for the weekend. And I was out early, like I normally am, and happened to see this little boy come down, and his mom came down. I'm not sure what they were looking at, but I just really liked the backlight. After that, the day kind of went on, and they were doing their own thing. But I made sure the next morning I was hoping that they would come back out. And that's when I was able to get this one. This little boy was fishing on his own, just a string and a stick. Kind of, to me, it kind of gave it that Norman Rockwell type appearance or look. Um, and Again, I like him being backlit so that it gives him a little separation from the water. There's ducks in the background, and of course, all of their family tubing accoutrement. Um, Here's one where the scene itself, the landscape is not that terribly interesting, but when I saw the people kayaking through there with the colors of their kayak, the reflections on the water. Again, I didn't make them sharper in focus. They're really not my subject, but I just feel like they add to the flow of the river. And then while I was panning along, following them, I had to add this. I like a little bit of humor sometimes in my photography, whether it's uh, cow's tongue cactus, maybe it's got holes in it, look like a face, or just anything that's kind of has a little bit of whimsy to it. And as I was following them, I saw this squirrel up on the branch, and all I could think of was, "Oh, look, a squirrel." So sometimes my attention span is like the squirrel. Um, the animals, though, that besides squirrels that you'll find on the river, we have the main ones are turtles, snakes, dragonflies, and birds and fish. Um, and so I thought I'd share some of those photographs. Um, this is a soft shell turtle and two cooters. I'm not very good at turtle identification. I have looked, and I understand that the two main turtles in the or cooters in the Guadalupe are the river cooter and the Texas river cooter. And since we're in Texas, I'm going to just say those are Texas river cooters. Um, and You can see the soft shell. He was ready to get off the rock as soon as I was getting a little too close. I had quit paddling while I was coming down the river, but I was focused on my photography and getting a little too close to him. Um, there's another one of the soft shells out there sunning himself. They just, to me, they're just kind of a prehistoric looking animal with a long neck and kind of a interesting snout. Um, I like a lot of like most people. I like my photographs to try to tell a story. These are red-eared sliders that were swimming alongside me for a moment. Um, I really don't know. I make up my own story a lot of times if I don't know the true story. So I don't know if this was a mom and a juvenile, mom or dad, a parent and a child swimming along, or male and female, just different size. But in my head, it's a mother and child swimming back towards shore. Um, I say if I can't, if I don't know the real story, I will try to create one that I enjoy. Um, Same thing here, where they're different. It seems like the different size turtles like to stay together. I'm not sure exactly why, if there's, um, but this here we were right on I was in the kayak again, right on the river, just a few inches off the river. And then with this guy, um, I really didn't, I kind of, like I said, I don't do a lot of development. I like to, um, trying to go think, think through my post development, but, adjust my exposure a little bit, my contrast. With him, I didn't pop the yellow. But when I used the dehaze slider, it seemed like everything just really popped out on him. Um, but he was sitting there looking right at me. Um, I was paddling upstream towards him, and what I typically do is just give a big, deep paddle, pick up my camera, and try to get him in focus as quickly as possible, hoping that I don't startle him. I really didn't startle him. I startled the one right next to him, which startled me, and and that was okay until the on the log right next to the one that jumped off also was a snake. Then I stopped photographing. I was paddling backwards to get out of the area. That's one thing we do have is a lot of water snakes. You don't see them very often. They're most prevalent typically around April. Think I don't know if it's breeding season exactly, but seems like typically around April, they're is when I see the majority of them. Um, I've heard them called a couple different names, diamondback water snake and brown water snakes. Some of the stuff I've learned about the snakes over time is if their body, like this one here, half of his body is going underwater. If their body goes underwater, typically they're non-venomous and they're water snakes. If their body stays on top of the water, um, they're typically more like a venomous water moccasin, cottonmouth, things of that nature. And they'll try to keep their head up more often than, or keep their head above the water. Um, I try not to harass the snakes, but I do try to get close enough that I can get a nice photograph. Um, and so this guy here, we were basically both heading the same direction. And I was really happy because his eye was probably about as sharp as I had gotten with any of the snake's eyes. Partly because, like I say, they're fairly elusive. They stay away from people as much as they can. And also just because one of the things I was reading about them is the water snakes, when they travel across the water, they do like the water going up over their nose, over their eye, basically over their head, which makes it hard to get a really sharp focus a lot of times. With this one, I like the elongated reflection in the water as well. Just kind of added some interesting character to him, I thought. Um, then dragonflies. Um, I'm not a macro photographer yet and all that stuff, but having watched some of the other presentations here on Linda's Happiness Hour, I do want to do more. I've gotten very excited about it. Um, Dragonflies are just they're all over the side of the river. They're everywhere. I believe these are blue skimmers. I'm slowly, very slowly learning my dragonflies. Um, I'm not 100% sure on the red one here, what his name is or what variety he is. Um, but I do enjoy photographing these dragonflies. Um, this guy, when I got home and ran it through Lightroom, just the shadows on his eyes kind of, to me, it reminded me of a kid rolling his eyes. Um, they hooked together just behind their heads. Um, and with these, the one thing I have learned from some of the previous presentations is with the dragonflies, don't get too excited if they fly away. It's just because there's a high chance that they'll come back and land in almost the same spot, and gives you a second chance if you didn't get that first photograph. Now, this might have been my second or third chance on this one. Um, and then with the wings, if I can get a nice shot of the dragonfly wings, they just remind me so much of, even though it's all clear of a stained glass window without the stain on this one, just all the different um, designs and patterns in there. Then which takes us to birds. There's a lot of birds along the river. Um, they're usually along the shorelines looking for the feeder fish. Like I say, with birds, I am not a proficient bird photographer. I have a lot of respect for everybody that does it. Um, but they can be very elusive. A lot of times it seems like they'll try to stay just in the brush from me. So the shots that I really like of them is when I get something interesting. I'm not sure why this bird's feathers are drooped the way they are, but it's to me, I just found it really interesting. Um, and then I do like when they're flying, if you can get a reflection, get their wings span open. Um, this guy's cruising across the water. Uh, I think he was doing okay. I was trying to get some photographs of him, but I might have gotten a little too close and spooked him. He didn't fly off, but probably more than 50 feet the other side of me, just enough to stay out of my range. Um, I do like though in the fall when we have the browns, the whites will pop against. They just stand out. The contrast is really nice. This guy was standing dead still, um, fishing. I was able to get a couple photographs, but they were just very soft with him catching a fish. That's why I say the bird photographers are very impressive to me because they're just so fast. Uh, I didn't realize that we had golden herons. I really didn't know there was a golden heron until I saw this guy out in the water. He was fishing also, um, with his sharp eye. And the thing I liked about him though is the water itself was very gold also, to where he really blended in on that day. Um, just he was just fun to sit and watch. I say a lot of times I like to catch the birds doing something normal, but something you don't always see. This is a vulture. One of the things I try to do if I'm not a big fan of vultures, they're not the prettiest of all birds. So a lot of times I'll set challenges for myself to get the best photograph I can of a vulture. Um, I like this guy. He was hopping around and stopped and had himself a drink. Um, these ducks, it was another one of the cold snaps that we had here in Texas, and they were just lined up in a diamond pattern, just swimming right at me. I'm not sure if they thought I had bread or whatever. I don't take anything for the ducks, but they were heading to me like I might be able to do something for them. And then there's the Egyptian goose. These guys are very prevalent all over South Texas, whether it's in parks, anywhere there's water, they're there. Um, I like this guy. He had just been cleaning himself there in the water. You can still see the water droplets on his breast, on his chest. Um, the colors, like I said, they're so plentiful that you can kind of get used to them. And I wanted to get something kind of interesting with them. And since this guy was hanging around and not running, trying to avoid me, I was able to get a real nice close shot of his feathers, um, with the colors, the pattern, and the texture in there. Uh, just something to me, it was something unique that I hadn't really seen anything, a photograph that close, that tight to the feathers. And then in the spring come the young, of course. This one's being watched over by a parent. Um, you can see the water droplets on him. He's grooming himself, and his half his leg is in the water, but all the while being watched over. And there he is again. He just kind of moved around that time, gave me a little bit better shot of his eye, I thought. Felt like he gave me more of a look. Um, this is the Muscovy duck. They are definitely not handsome. And I had always wanted to get a nice photograph of one. And this guy was swimming along by me, and with the reflection, the colors on the Muscovy seemed to just really pop. Um, and on this one, he just was just real right. The symmetry with the reflection, I just had to take this photograph when he came swimming by. Uh, this is the one though that was a big challenge for me. This is the crested, I believe it's the crested night heron. And the first time I ever saw one was here in Texas. And I thought, oh wow, I'm gonna get a photograph of him. They will hide in the grass, they'll hide in the trees, they will stay just out of range of your lens to get really sharp. And so they just became a big challenge. And every time I went out, if I saw one, I would almost stop anything else that I was doing and try to get a photograph of them in focus. To where it got to where um, I, I've got some with them eating. Here he was catching bugs alongside the river. Uh, there's a spot on the river that I found where there's a nesting pair that return every year. Um, this year they were repairing their nest earlier this year, and then a few months later they had their babies, their fledglings, and these guys are not nearly as handsome as they will be when they grow up. But I really like this photograph. The eye is in focus, is sharp, but the feathers on their head just give them that just rolled out of bed look is kind of the way I see it. And they're a lot of fun to sit and watch. They can be a little aggressive with each other. I think that's just primarily birds themselves. The next thing I was going to share was fishing. Fishing is, if tubing is our tourism in the summer, fishing would be our big event in the fall and throughout the winter. This boy was, I think this was on a camping trip where we were camping on the river. This boy had paddled in. Um, I liked it. He stayed right in the light and was casting off into the shadowy areas of the water. Gave his kayak a lot of color. Of course, he's in a nice bright yellow shirt in case anything happened to him. Um, on a lot of these, with the fishing, I like to try to stop the action, get the line in the air. Um, this gentleman was just heading out early in the morning. This was actually on the Comal River, and I thought it was just kind of interesting. His kit. I was trying to figure out how I might do it with instead of fishing poles with camera equipment, um, but I'm not sure that I wouldn't tip over and get everything wet. My typical setup is either in the kayak or the paddleboard. I'll use a dry bag, uh, usually a towel, a lot of times a beach towel because they're so large. And then I'll stick my camera equipment down in there. I try not to take too much because I am a little bit concerned that if I tip, I would get everything saturated, put everything in the river. Um, but this guy here, he was set up to go out and fish for the morning. Um, Fly fishing, though, when it comes to that, I think it's probably the prettiest of all fishing, um, with the feeding of the line, casting it out. This gentleman here, I was able to sit and watch him for a couple hours, and because he had on the glasses, I decided I didn't want to focus on him at all. So I was really happy when I was able to get the fish's eye in focus and not really worry about his eye because he had on the sunglasses. Um, but yeah, he was out a couple hours, probably caught 4 or 5 fish. Might have been because they're catch and release. It might have been the same fish. I don't know. I'm not a fly fisherman yet. I hope to give it a try sometime. But then here's another one. I was actually driving down the road for this one and had just crossed the bridge and saw these folks down there fishing. So I stopped, crawled underneath the bridge, got down to the water, and I was able to talk to these guys a little bit. And this is a father and his son. This was the first time he'd gotten to take his son out onto the water. They had practiced a little bit in their backyard or something, but it was the first opportunity they'd had to get out on the water. And here I just really like the synchronization that they've got going, the kind of repeating lines with their draws and their casts. It was just really great to watch them and talk to them a little bit and see the son enjoy what the dad was teaching him. Um, this one I just kind of put in there because I thought it was cute. I like the photograph because I'm shooting through the rocks and shooting through the foreground and the branches. But this gentleman's fishing and his wife is paddling the canoe. I'm not sure if she knew that he wasn't paddling, uh, but the red, I thought there again, I think the red helps make it stand out a little bit. Um, and this is what the guides usually set up with is these pontoon type boats. So you can stand up and fly fish out of them. Let's see. Uh, I figured since I was talking about the Guadalupe around the New Braunfels area, I should definitely share some of what I've come to decide was definitely the Texas's summer pastime is tubing. If you come to New Braunfels, it is a big business. You'll see vans with trailers going around town, picking people up, dropping them off on one end of the river and picking them up on the other. The tubes, of course, can come in all different shapes and colors. This girl happens to have a real bright pink flamingo. Um, if you don't float, that's okay. Here in Texas, just take your chair out and set it up for the day out in the middle of the river. Uh, I just really liked that when I saw it. They were out before I was this morning. They didn't stay out, but this is early in the morning and they already had their tent set up and their chairs ready to go. Um, People will be floating quite a bit. Everybody just really has a enjoyable time, and uh, sometimes they'll get in big, large groups. They'll bring their dogs, their kids, um, whenever I'm kayaking, I've found though that I can usually go around them fairly easily. And because it is recreation, everybody seems to always be having just a good time, and I don't think I've really seen any arguments or fights on the river. Um, I thought this one was kind of funny. This guy had figured it out. Um, had somebody, he was in tow while somebody was kayaking him. Um, this is up at the between the fourth and the third crossing. Um, all the different outfitters. like to let you know where they're at in case you want to stop. This is, I think we had just put in here, uh, and that was my girlfriend taking off ahead of me. Um, Plus, with the kayaks, like I say, there's a lot of color to them. If you do come, um, you can rent tubes, you can rent kayaks. These are actually rentals. They come in all the different colors, and these girls were just having all these kids were actually having just a really good time. Um, you don't have to have a plastic kayak. These are blow up ones. This gentleman's just relaxing with his dog. And then I figured I'd end it here with let's see, two grandkids, a cousin, and two kids that they picked up at the campground waving goodbye. And that's pretty much my presentation on the Guadalupe River.
All right, Kurt, that was great. Let me get you to take down your screen. Um, I think you came back and answered the question, but let me ask you, just so that we're clear, are you taking your D750 on your kayak?
I do. I do. Some of the things I've learned with it, though, I try to be very careful. I now use the magnetic. If I use a filter, I may use an ND filter sometimes. Um, Use a polarizer quite a bit, but learned to use the magnetic ones because when I stick my camera into the towel, into the dry bag with the screw-on filters, you can get a little fog in there, and
Mm-hmm.
then it seems like it takes. Then I'm stuck trying to unscrew the filter and get it all cleaned out. But yeah, I take it with me all the time.
So, okay, so your balance is incredible because there's no way that I would be able to hold that still enough with the kayak moving, the water's moving. Um, are any tips on that? Not that I'm going to take my camera.
With the kayak, I use a top load kayak. I don't sit down in my kayak.
Okay.
And so my bag sits basically right in my lap. With the paddle board, I will keep the bag closed and strapped to the bag until I get somewhere where, and I'm usually always looking ahead to figure out if there's something ahead that I want to get a photograph of. But then I'll stop, get it out, and because the paddleboard I'm not quite as balanced on as I am the kayak.
Yeah, there's some comments in here, and we're all of us are agreeing there's no way we'd be able to manage to keep our cameras dry. So that's impressive. Um, what struck me with your series of photographs is how well your reflections are, how beautiful they are. Cypress trees, I've got a weak spot for, so I knew they were gonna. I was like, they better be in this presentation, but they're beautiful. And I know there's a lot of people in this room that are not from Texas and probably haven't seen a cypress tree, but they are impressive. And you, I think, captured them beautifully. For somebody that's not a bird photographer, you have a lot of birds in your,
I do,
yeah.
yes.
And again, reflections, that's really a strong suit for you. So good for you. Um, Personally, for some people know this, I'm not a swimmer. I don't mind being on the water. I'm not getting in the water, but what I got out of this is the views, because those are views that I will never get as a photographer. There's no way I'm ever getting on a paddleboard or a kayak. So thank you for taking me on that little a peek into the view from that vantage point. So thank you for doing this presentation for us.
Thank you.
Um, I I'm tickled that you did this because I thought there's no way he's going to do it. I think I underestimate my ability to talk people into things because I really thought he's going to say no. And when you didn't, I was like, well, I don't know where to go from this. And I was like, let's get a date before he changes his mind. So thank you. I know that you spent some time putting this together. And the best part is there's not just people from Texas in this room. So I hope that we got to share our a little bit of a peek of life along a Texas river with our friends from Minnesota and Pennsylvania, New Jersey. Who else is in here? There's some Arizona. I think there's Washington in here. So, um, and another thing is the water at the Guadalupe is really pretty, you know,
It is, and it'll change with the light. So you can get
right?
golden color on it, green
Yeah.
leaves, or that real vibrant blue.
Yeah, so I grew up in South Texas, and the Nueces River is what I grew up in. And I'll tell you, it's never been green, it's never been blue, it's brown and muddy. So when I moved up here, I was like, wait a minute, are they coloring the water here? It's beautiful. Guadalupe is one of the prettiest rivers in Texas. So thank you for sharing and showing that off for us. So,
Thank you.
yeah. All right. Next week, Lawrence Lederman returns for part 2 of his presentation, Conquer the Outdoors, your guide to landscape photography gear, techniques, and adventure prep. So until next time, go out and create something beautiful. And I hope that we see you again soon.